Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great literature into gripping radio. In today's episode, we bring you part 4 in a 5-part adaptation of The Adventure of the Abbey Grange, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery. Holmes and Watson have been called to investigate a brutal murder at the Abbey Grange, a stately country house in Kent. Lady Brackenstall claimed to have witnessed the murder of her abusive husband at the hands of a gang of burglars. Her story seemed credible, but after a careful investigation, Holmes has concluded that the lady and her nurse have lied, and that the murder occurred entirely differently than her account would suggest. In part 4, Holmes questions the lady and her nurse for a final time. Lady Brackenstall's stern Australian nurse was an interesting woman. Taciturn, suspicious, ungracious. It took some time before Holmes's pleasant manner and frank acceptance of all that she said thawed her into a corresponding amiability. She did not attempt to conceal her hatred for her late employer.
Yes, sir. It is true that he threw the decanter at me. He might have thrown a dozen if he would, but left my lady alone. He was forever ill-treating her, and she was too proud to complain. She will not even tell me that all he's done to her. She never told me of those marks on her arm that you saw this morning, but I know very well that they come from a stab he gave her with a hat pin. The sly devil. God forgive me that I should speak of him so, now that he's dead. But a devil he was, if ever one walked the earth. He was all honey when we first met him, only 18 months ago, and we both feel as if it were 18 years. My lady had only just arrived in London, yeah. It was her first voyage. He won her with his title and his money and his false London ways. And if she made a mistake, she's paid for it, if ever a woman did. We arrived in June, and it was July when they met. They were married in January of last year. She's down in the morning room again, and I've no doubt that she'll see you. But you must not ask too much of her, for she has gone through all that flesh and blood can stand.
When Holmes and I entered the morning room, we found Lady Brackenstall reclining on the same couch, looking brighter than before. The maid had entered with us and began once more to delicately attend the bruise upon her mistress's brow.
I hope that you have not come to cross-examine me again.
No, I will not cause you any unnecessary trouble, Lady Brackenstall, and my whole desire is to make things easy for you, for I am convinced that you are a woman who has been badly abused. If you treat me as a friend and trust me, you may find that I will justify your trust.
What do you want me to do?
To tell me the truth.
Mr. Holmes!
No, Lady Brackenstall, it is no use. You may have heard of the small reputation which I possess. I will stake it all on the fact that your story is an absolute fabrication.
Mistress and maid were both staring at Holmes with pale faces and frightened eyes.
You are an impudent fellow. Do you mean to say that my mistress has told a lie?
Holmes rose from his chair.
Have you nothing to tell me?
I have told you everything.
Think once more, Lady Brackenstall. Would it not be better to be frank with me?
For an instant, there was hesitation on her beautiful face. Then, some new, strong thought caused it to set like a mask.
I have told you all I know.
Holmes took his hat and shrugged his shoulders.
I am sorry.
Without another word to either woman, we left the room and then the house. There was a pond in the park, and my friend made straight for it. It was frozen over, but a single hole was left for the convenience of a solitary swan. Holmes gazed at it, and then we walked on to the gatehouse, where Holmes scribbled a short note for Stanley Hopkins to leave with the lodgekeeper.
It may be a hit or it may be a miss, but we are honor-bound to do something for our friend Hopkins. I will not quite take him into my confidence yet. I think that our next scene of operations must be the shipping office of the Adelaide-Southampton line, which stands at the end of Pall Mall, if I remember right. There is a second line of steamers which connect South Australia with England, but we will draw the larger cover first.
We returned directly by the next train to London and arrived at the shipping office late that afternoon. We were not long in acquiring the information we needed. In June of 95, only one of their ships had reached home port. It was the Rock of Gibraltar, their largest and best boat. A reference to the passenger list showed that Miss Fraser of Adelaide, with her maid, had made the voyage in her. Her officers were the same as in 95, with one exception. The first officer, Mr. Jack Croker, had been made a captain and was to take charge of a new ship, the Bass Rock, sailing in 2 days' time from Southampton. His record was magnificent. As to his character, he was reliable on duty, but a wild fellow off the deck of his ship, hot-headed, excitable, but loyal, honest, and kind-hearted. That was the information with which Holmes left the office of the Adelaide Southampton Company. From there we drove to Scotland Yard, but instead of entering, we sat in the cab as Holmes stared down at his shoes, lost in profound thought.
Never mind, cabby, drive on.
He directed the driver to the Charing Cross Telegraph Office, sent off a message, and then, at last, we made for Baker Street once more. My friend broke out talking the moment we arrived home.
I couldn't do it, Watson. Once that warrant is made out, nothing on earth can save him. Once or twice in my career, I have felt that I have done more harm by discovering a criminal than he had ever done by his crime. I have learned caution now, and I would rather play tricks with the law of England than with my own conscience. Let us learn a little more before we act.
Before evening, we had a visit from Inspector Stanley Hopkins. Things were not going very well for him.
I believe that you're a wizard, Mr. Holmes. How on earth could you know that the stolen silver was at the bottom of that pond?
I didn't know it.
But you told me to examine it.
You got it then?
Yes, I got it.
I'm very glad if I've helped you.
But you haven't helped me. You have made the case far more difficult. What sort of burglars steal silver and then throw it into the nearest pond?
It is certainly rather eccentric behavior. I was merely going on the idea that if the silver had been taken by persons who did not want it, who merely used it as a misdirection, they would naturally be anxious to get rid of it.
But why should such an idea cross your mind?
Well, I thought it was possible. When they came out through the window, there was the pond with one tempting little hole in the ice right in front of their noses. Could there be a better hiding place?
Yes, I see it now. It was early. There were people on the roads. They were afraid of being seen with the silver, so they dropped it in the pond, intending to return for it when the coast was clear. Excellent, Mr. Holmes. That is better than your idea of a deliberate misdirection.
Quite so. You've got a good theory. I have no doubt that my own ideas are quite wild, but you must admit that they have ended in discovering the silver.
Yes, sir. Yes. It was all your doing, but I have had a bad setback.
A setback?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. The Randall gang were arrested in New York this morning.
Dear me, Hopkins. That certainly goes against your theory that they committed a murder in Kent last night.
It is fatal, Mr. Holmes. Absolutely fatal. Still, there are other gangs of three besides the Randalls. Or it may be some new gang of which the police have never heard.
Quite so. It is perfectly possible. What, are you off?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. There is no rest for me until I have got to the bottom of the business. I suppose you have no hint to give me?
I have given you one. You won't stop for dinner? Well, goodbye, and let us know how you get on.
We ate dinner, and the table was cleared before Holmes mentioned the case again. He lit his pipe and held his slippered feet to the cheerful blaze of the fire. Suddenly, he looked at his watch.
I expect developments, Watson.
When?
Now. Within a few minutes. I dare say you thought I acted rather badly to Stanley Hopkins just now.
I trust your judgment.
A very sensible reply, Watson. You must look at it this way. What I know is unofficial. What he knows is official. I have the right to private judgment, but he does not. He's an officer of Scotland Yard and must disclose all he knows or become a traitor to his service. I will withhold my information from him until my own mind is clear on the matter.
But when will that be?
The time has come. You will now be present at the last scene of a remarkable little drama.
There was a sound upon the stairs, and our door was opened to admit as fine a specimen of manhood as ever passed through it. He was a very tall young man, blue-eyed, with a skin which had been burned by tropical suns, and a springy step which showed that his huge frame was as active as it was strong. He closed the door behind him, and then he stood with clenched hands and heaving breast, choking down some overmastering emotion.
Sit down, Captain Croker. You got my telegram?
Our visitor sank into an armchair and looked from one to the other of us with questioning eyes.
I got your telegram and I came at the hour you said. Let's hear the worst. Very well, Watson. Allow me to introduce Captain Croker, the pride of the Adelaide-Southampton line, accomplished seaman, trusted first officer, and, as of last night, the murderer of Sir Eustace Brackenstall, the unfortunate late Master Abbey Grange. Settle down, Captain. You have quite a story to tell.
With that, we've come to the end of our 4th episode. Join us tomorrow evening as we hear Captain Croker's true account of the murder which took place at Abbey Grange the night before on our final installment of this tale here on BeFM Drama.